Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. And are presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I am Evan Marinofsky, joined by nobody. It is just me today. It is you and me. We're just talking. It's a Saturday morning after a 6-2 loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets, a very forgettable game. We'll talk about that a little bit at the top right now, but I really want to get into superlatives. 3 months in, kind of sort of a state of the team. We sort of get to take stock of what the Bruins are, what they aren't, who's doing well, who isn't. The narrative for the first 2 months, obviously, was sort of everybody was terrible. And in December, things went up. I know it didn't seem it on Friday, but there were some good superlatives here, and there's some worthy winners through 3 months, which, again, I mean, do we want to spend 20 minutes talking about the Friday night game? No. Nope. I don't want to do that. I can't imagine you want to do that. And so it's just me here today, which I like. I haven't done this in a while. I was going to do this like a couple weeks ago when I put out on Twitter that I wanted to do a mailbag. And then the great Court Lalonde came on and joined me. So I didn't have to do that solo. So this is my first solo episode in a long time. It's holiday week. I didn't feel like asking anybody to do it. People do certain things with their holidays, and figured why not just do it myself. So it's just you and me, just catching up. How you doing? All that stuff. So the game on Friday night, obviously 6-2. I'm recording this Saturday morning, so the game against the back-to-back, the second game against the Blue Jackets, has yet to happen. Terrible loss. They got manhandled. I mean, that second period was awful. Scott McLaughlin of WEEI had an awesome story Friday night / Saturday morning about how the special teams for the Bruins has let them down time and time again. And it's really let them down a lot. It did obviously on Friday night, but it hasn't been fixed since the coaching change at all. The PK has been bad. It was bad on Friday. The power play, obviously, we've talked a lot about that. That hasn't really gotten any better. So, I mean, that was a big difference on Friday. They're in that game a little bit more if they don't have their PK troubles and they convert maybe one of those power play chances. 2 is asking a lot, but 1 would have been nice. And I also just think you look at sort of the letdown from Friday's game after Monday's. I mean, Connor and I talked about that Capitals win maybe being the best of the season, and they follow it up with a dud. Like, I feel like that's been sort of the case all year. They take 2 steps forward, they take 2 steps back. And I think that's sort of why you can't buy into this team. You can't sit there and say, oh my God, I have full faith this team's going deep. Like, does anyone? And I think that's what's going to make them so infuriating, because they're in the playoffs. They're probably going to make the playoffs. I would be shocked if they didn't. The rest of the conference is bad. They tread water. So if they're in it, they're going to have some really good performances, some really good nights against, a Panthers or the Lightning or the Leafs. And then they're going to have some games where you're like, what the hell was that? And I just, I think back to 22-23 and, that incredible season. I remember thinking, like, they didn't lose 4 straight games all year. How are they possibly going to lose 4 games in a series? And of course they found a way to do that. And I wonder if this year it's almost like we're like, oh, they can't string 4 good wins together. And then they go and do it 4 times and win a cup. But I'm not getting that far ahead of myself with that, because I just don't have the faith that this team come the playoffs is going to be able to string together good performances. And I think what makes it so infuriating is they're not a team predicated on skill. That, it's not like, oh, they need, Pastrnak to be sniping goals, and they need, Pavel Zacha to be dangling guys, and Brad Marchand to be, undressing defenders and things like that. They win games 3-1, 4-2. They win with great defense, good structure, compete, kind of gritty play in the offensive zone. We'll get into Morgan Geekie in a bit, but even like that first goal they scored on Friday, where Geekie forechecks hard and forces the Columbus D to make a turnover, like things like that. That's just hard work. That's compete. Why is that not there more? And it is kind of built for the playoffs. They just aren't doing it consistently enough to where I have faith that that is going to be executed come April, May, and June. So those are sort of my two big takeaways from that Columbus game. Again, we'll see what they do on Saturday night. We'll talk more about that on Monday in Monday's Bruins beat. I know this week's been kind of weird with podcasts just because Christmas was on Wednesday and Christmas Eve was Tuesday. And, it just was an odd time for the scheduling, which is why this is coming out either on a Saturday or Sunday. But this is kind of evergreen. This is evergreen because it's December 28th as I record this. We're almost to the end of the month. It's been about 3 months of the season. And again, wanted to take stock of sort of where the team's at and who's shined, who hasn't. And we're going to do superlatives. It's like a high school yearbook in here. We are going to do some different things here. We'll do MVP later, but I want to start with most improved. Who's been the most improved Bruin? I'm also curious to hear your answers to all these things, so make sure to leave a comment on YouTube, shoot me a tweet, DM me on Twitter, whatever you want to do. If you agree, you disagree, you have better candidates for these. But for most improved, I don't think there's a ton of candidates. But I went with Mark Kastelik. Mark Kastelik, of all people. And I think when you think about when he came in, right, he was the throw into that trade. At least it felt like. Right, it was like the first round pick was the big fish, right? In that deal, that was the big one. Then you got Jonas Korpisalo, who is your backup, and a guy that has been established in the NHL. And then you had Mark Kastelik, who played I think like 63 and 65 games the last 2 years for Ottawa. He was thought of as inconsistent. He played a gritty game, physical, could fight, but you just didn't see that all the time. Again, it was the consistency issue with Ottawa that he struggled with. And since coming here, he's been stable. I mean, just remember starting the year, it was that fourth line of him, Cole Koepke, and Johnny Beecher that was scoring their goals. That's why they were winning those games early in the year, was because that fourth line was humming. And that starts with Kastelik. And I think Kastelik's, the way he plays, the style he plays, his ability, he has 11 points so far this year, so he's tied his career high. He's still young, and he's a bottom sixer, so I can't imagine him going a ton higher than that. But still tied a career high, and we're 3 months into the year, so my guess is, knock on wood, he beats his career high. And I just think the physicality he brings, the forechecking, the toughness, and I know we make fun of toughness a lot and say that it doesn't matter, but a guy like him who can skate well, who's physical, who can create offense through that physicality, then it's worth it. No, he's not just some lug out there skating around, not Matt Rempe. There's a lot of value that he brings. And I think he's been, so far, I mean, he's been an outstanding part of that trade. That was a great throw-in that the Bruins got. And he's someone that I am curious when the playoffs come around, what is his role? It seems the Bruins kind of have a shutdown line forming with that Marchand, Lindholm, and Coyle line, which I would assume would be deployed against a Matthews line or a Barkov line come the playoffs. But I do wonder what Kastelik can bring you in a postseason series because, the Bruins gotten dummied around in recent years. And I think that he brings an added element there that they need. And pitches and scoring every now and again, which is nice. And they did try him up in the lineup. It didn't really work. I think he's more of a fourth liner. He'll be kind of a NHL journeyman, but I genuinely think he's probably been the most improved on this team. An alternate candidate, and it's hard to say this after Friday's game, but Jonas Korpisalo. I mean, you think about, we talked about it a lot. His numbers in Ottawa last year were not good. And coming into this year, didn't really have a lot of expectations for him. Was he going to be able to adequately back up Jeremy Swayman? And he has. I mean, obviously, yes, Friday night was bad, but even entering Friday, I mean, he had the 9th highest high danger save percentage in hockey at 5-on-5. We joke all the time that if it's a high danger chance, he makes the save every time. It's more so the shots from outside that he's not as great with. So he's a candidate for it, but I still think Kastelik probably gets it there. Mark Kastelik would be my pick for most improved. I'm curious to hear who else you guys think for most improved. But to me, Kastelik is the winner there. Most underrated. We have 2 awards, 2 superlatives coming up. I think that sort of go kind of the same, but not. They're a little different. I'll explain them. Most underrated. I'll go with Hampus Lindholm. He's been injured for a while. He's been out. But you think about last year, and you think about sort of the postseasons he's had here. that have really been underwhelming. I know he had that big goal last year against Toronto. He had the pass to Pastrnak in Game 7 as well. But really, like, just ineffective last year at times, and has had issues in the playoffs, which has been unfortunate. But you think back to that 22-23 season, the regular season, and we was third in the Norris, and you're like, holy crap, like, Bruins have something in this guy. Totally worth trading a first-round pick for. And up until he got injured, a month or so ago, he was playing at that level. He was great. The team stunk, and there were so many bad things, and that's what we sort of focused on, obviously. But he was terrific. He was great. And so I think he's been obviously a huge loss. You wonder whenever he does come back, and I don't have any update on that. I don't have any new news for that. I do wonder when he comes back, that power play, that last game that he got injured, and he was running that top power play unit. They just finally put him up there. And I would assume when he comes back, they do the same again. Because again, that first power play needs to be freshened up. The personnel has been the exact same. The formation has sort of been the same too. They keep trying to force it to Pastrnak for one-timers. So that, again, I think Lindholm provides you something a little bit different there. And again, he's still second on the Bruins in Corsi for percentage. He didn't have a lot of offensive zone starts either. So again, just a guy who reliable, good puck mover, and can pitch in on the offense. So to me, most underrated is Hampus Lindholm. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what he is when he comes back. Can he jump right back into that form? Because if he can, that's going to be a huge help to that back end. Because again, as we've talked a lot about this year, they're a team predicated on defense. And that's a big addition back there. And Jordan Osterley's been great. Jordan Osterley, I think, has been phenomenal, reliable puck mover. He's played a lot of NHL games. I would assume he probably moves out for Lindholm, but also like Lowry is inconsistent at times in his own zone. So he can provide that offense, and maybe you do want him for that second power play unit. But I do wonder, is it Osterley that comes out or Lowry? I think it's probably going to be a little bit of both when Hampus Lindholm comes back. We'll do another one here. Most overlooked but shouldn't be. I made this myself. Really, most overlooked but shouldn't be. MOBSB, the Mosby Award, Mr. Mosby Award. Really just flows right off the tongue. And I go with Morgan Geekie. Morgan Geekie, he was brutal first 2 months. First 2 months, he was a nothing. And it's funny because, he's a pending UFA. And I remember when the Bruins went and got him before last season, Conor Ryan wrote a lot about how this guy kind of had all this untapped potential, and he showed it last year. And he really did. I mean, he fit anywhere in the lineup. Come the Panthers series, he was centering the top line. And I think we all agreed, like, this isn't the spot for him. And ironically enough, he's on the top line still, even after they went out and signed Elias Lindholm. So the thing with Geekie recently is he has fit well with Zacha and Pastrnak. He didn't register a point on Friday, but it was his great forechecking. It was him pinning that Columbus defender up against the glass that led to Zacha's goal. He didn't get an assist on it, but gets an assist in the heart. And so again, he's been terrific with Zacha and Pastrnak. I think he has 9 points in December so far. And again, there's, a game or two left in the month, but you'll take that every time from him. He's scoring timely goals. He's setting plays up. And again, he's sort of got a little grit to him, good two-way guy. So I just wonder with him, like, what do you do with that guy? Do you re-sign him at the end of the year? Or do you let him walk? Or do you deal him now when he has a lot of trade value? Now, the Bruins are not, in my opinion, and from, sort of different things I've heard, they are not going to be a team that is going to be looking to add draft picks at the deadline, especially in the position that they're in. I know we've talked a lot about going for a retool this year, but I think they want players back. I think that if they're going to trade a Geekie or a Frederick, who we'll get to in a bit, they're going to want guys who can help their roster now. I don't know. What are you getting for Morgan Geekie? I would love for them to get, second or third round pick at the deadline. I think that's terrific. That's what you should go for. But they're in a playoff spot. And we know that when the Bruins are, in even just striking distance of the playoffs, they want to get there. They feel they have a chance. So I don't know what you're getting for Geekie. So my guess is they hold on to him unless they package him with other things for someone bigger. I just don't see them dealing him for like a second or third, even though maybe that might be the best move long term. It's interesting though, because again, as I said, he is producing now, so he brings you that value. He's worked in that top 6. I think we can all agree that he's probably not a long-term top 6 guy, but like he's playing like it. He's playing like it. So that's the funny part where we're sort of, that's why most overlooked, but shouldn't be like, he's close. He's close. Maybe you like Morgan Geekie so much that you're willing to take more goals in any given game from Morgan Geekie over at Prize Picks, because as we know, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. And again, Prize Picks loves making the holidays bigger and brighter, and it's the best place to get real money action. And it's Picksmas, baby. It's Picksmas. In December, they were very generous with their giveaways, $30+ million in rewards, and that's why we say Picksmas. There's Christmas, there's Festivus, and there's Picksmas. And I gotta say, on Christmas, I talked about this the other day. There were some really good, more or less players to take for on Christmas Day for the NFL games, for the NBA games. Jason Tatum was down to like 21.5 points, so that was an easy more easily, even though they lost. You still know Jason Tatum's doing that. So maybe you want to get on a Morgan Geekie while he's hot. Maybe you want to buy high. Nothing wrong with that. So again, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Run your game over at Prize Picks. Why not? What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that. So we've done geeky. We've done most overlooked. We've done most underrated. We've done most improved. Let's do most likely to be traded. Trent Frederick. I don't think there's any surprise here. We'll get to a surprise in a bit. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Not a lot of value there. That's the problem. But we keep hearing these reports from the insiders like Friedman and Kevin Weeks that Frederick has suitors. Frederick has teams that really like his potential, what he could be. Why would you trade for that guy when you could just sign him for the most possible money in the offseason? So that's my biggest thing. What's the value there? And I mean, we'll get to biggest disappointment, and he's certainly a candidate. Just hasn't given you much. And that's been the tough part with him is like, you saw streaks of it last year. You saw it in 22-23 where he was dynamite. He was consistent. A guy that could contribute with the physicality, could put up points, was impactful. You noticed him. Good defensive game. This year just hasn't been there. And I don't know what it is. But to me, the feeling with him is he's going to be traded at some point. What his value will be, that's a great question. That's a great question, Evan. I don't know. I mean, I always say the trade deadline deals, the prices get so insane that it wouldn't shock me if he got you a first or second round pick around the deadline. If someone's, if there's a lot of teams going for him, it also wouldn't shock me if you didn't get a lot of value for him either. You could do kind of a struggling player swap. I don't know who that would be, but I would assume that's the route the Bruins would be more apt to take because they would add someone to their lineup. But I also think when you look at sort of, they have Patra and Providence, who's definitely ready to come up. They went out and just got Oliver Wahlstrom. They waived Tyler Johnson. So like you have guys internally. If you did trade Frederick for picks or a pick or a prospect, I mean, you still have your third liners. You can still roll out there. You can put Matt Patra there, and you can put Oliver Wahlstrom there, and you have Justin Brazeau. So you don't have to get a player in return, but I would imagine that's what they would want. I think they would want to do sort of like, how the Devils traded Pavel Zacha and got Eric Haula for him. I would assume the Bruins want to do something similar, just on a smaller scale. Connor always mentions the Tanner Jeannot trade. If you can get that, I mean, you have to do that. You have to do that to get all those picks. You would do that every single time. Biggest disappointment, it could go to Frederick, could go to Trent Frederick. But I will go Elias Lindholm. And obviously, Elias Lindholm over the last bunch of games has really seemed to find his groove. He registered another assist on in Friday's game. He's been producing ever since that Vancouver game. Looks much more comfortable. You saw it against Calgary too. He was much, much better. But up until then, the offensive production was awful. Aside from that 3-assist game against the Islanders the night before Thanksgiving, it was just, there were nights you didn't notice him. He was well into the minuses. I know we rag on plus minus, but he was well into the minuses and just not the guy you thought you were getting. And obviously it takes time for free agents to acclimate. Not everyone just comes right in and makes an impact. But I think that just the lack of impact, the lack of even average impact, the lack of even average production has been really concerning. And I think he's at like 19 points in 36 or 37 games so far. And he's still third on the team, which is incredible. But that's still not where you need him. You need him to be up with Marchand and Pastrnak. And he's been on that pace the last 5 or 6 games. Can that be sustained, though? Because the Bruins are coming up on a crazy slate of games. They have Columbus Saturday, but then they have games coming up against a plethora of really good teams. I don't have the schedule in front of me right now, so I don't want to misspeak on some of those teams, and I don't want to ruin the network connection with this. But again, I can't stress enough how they need him to be better. And up until the last 6 games, he really was not worth anywhere near what they paid for him. But it's good, at least. It's good that he's been that way of late. So there's that. I think there's a lot of guys you could put in the biggest disappointment category. Obviously, over the last month, a lot of guys have come out of that. But to me, Elias Lindholm, you went out, you spent big money. He was your big fish. You could put Zadorov in there as well. He's been better over the last couple games too. He's been better, especially since Joe Sacco took over. You've seen him be a lot more impactful, better puck moving, all that stuff. But again, I go with Elias Lindholm for biggest disappointment. We got to have like names for all these superlatives. Like, I don't know if you guys listen to the Rewatchables podcast over at The Ringer, and they have like, you know, it's like the Joey Pants Award. They name everything for the awards. Maybe we'll like connect this to the 2011 Bruins, like the Michael Ryder Most Improved Player, or you know, like the Andrew Ference Most Overlooked but Shouldn't Be, or something like that. Maybe we'll do that going forward when we do this again, because Lord knows we'll be doing it again. Least surprising surprise, least surprising surprise to me is that Jim Montgomery got fired. Least surprising surprise. Little bit of a surprise because he had been really successful in the regular season over the previous 2 years. Not so surprising, given that he went into this year as a lame duck. And there wasn't a huge vote of confidence from the front office. Never felt that way. Wasn't an internal candidate either. Like, he didn't come up through the Bruins, which, you know, Joe Sacco has been here, 10 prior years as an assistant. Bruce Cassidy was in Providence for a long time. Claude, obviously, that's a different era, but just never seemed to fit. And again, clearly the St. Louis stuff had that in his back pocket the whole time. It felt like the more I talk to people, the more I get the feeling that St. Louis had that thing written out a long time ago. Not saying that that's factual or anything, but like, feels like that might have been the case. But again, just what I think, like, the biggest thing with Montgomery is I think he's a good coach. I do. I don't think he's a stooge. I think he's a good, solid NHL coach who's kind of in that, like, 7 to 12 range of NHL coaches. Can sometimes get a little higher than that, sometimes a little lower. But I mean, to think in his division, he'd have to go through Craig Berube and or Paul Maurice and or John Cooper to get to the conference final. I don't know about that. I mean, Sheldon Keefe and the Leafs came oh so close to coming back from a 3-1 deficit last year. Paul Maurice and the Panthers certainly did 2 years ago. He had problems with the playoffs in Dallas too. I don't know. So I'm not surprised, but a little bit of surprise. So least surprising surprise would be Jim Montgomery getting fired. Quite an eventful couple of quite an eventful couple of first 2 months, excuse me, with the Swayman saga and then the Jim Montgomery signing, or the Jim Montgomery firing, excuse me. Before we get into the MVP so far, before we get into the hottest take going forward, the Bruins need to come up the biggest in the second half. Our friends over at Game Time. We love Game Time. We've always loved Game Time because Game Time, they're focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. If you haven't gotten a Christmas gift yet for someone, which I don't know why you wouldn't have by now, it's December 28th, Game Time is the perfect place to go do it. Go get your tickets because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can't stop talking about the Game Time flash deals. Couple hours before a game, Game Time will show you tickets that are heavily discounted, and they show you the full price with taxes, with fees, with all that stuff, so you know what you're spending when you click on the ticket. And I can't thank them enough for that. I get so agitated when I see, oh, that ticket's only like $35, and then I go to checkout and it's like $55. Game Time's not like that. Game Time's going to show you the price up front. The all-in pricing is awesome, and the flash deals. So I'm getting a discount, and I know what I'm paying off the jump. That's why Game Time is outstanding. I can't talk enough about them. You also get seat views, which is awesome. Get to see where you're sitting. Get to see what your view is going to look like. And that helps, especially like at TD Garden. I've been there a lot. Fenway Park, I've been there a lot. But when I'm I was at Wrigley Field last year. I went to Bridgestone Arena in Nashville like a month ago. I don't know what it's like in there. So to see it on the app helps me sort of visualize it and see, all right, I like that seat or I don't like that seat. So again, I can't say enough about that, the all-in pricing, and then the lowest price guarantee, which is awesome, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. It is definitely game time. As you can tell, I'm all stuffy all of a sudden because I've been in rinks the last bunch of days. I'm about to head off to a rink after this. I was at a rink for like 4 or 5 hours yesterday. It never seems to end, but it's time of year that you want to be in rinks. So I am all for it. What else can we do here? We'll do MVP last, sort of keep it as a surprise. The guy that the Bruins need to come up the biggest going forward, I think this one's easy. It's Jeremy Swayman. It is by far Jeremy Swayman. You can make the case for McAvoy. You can make the case for Elias Lindholm. You can make the case for Matt Poitras or David Pastrnak. Pastrnak's been producing a lot, though, lately. And it goes without saying you need him to be good. But Jeremy Swayman, I think it's fascinating. Like, obviously, we expected him to not start out great just because he missed all of training camp. But he has struggled for sure, over these 3 months, even as of late, like recently, has had some tougher showings. He got blamed for that game in Edmonton, which again, I don't put that all on him, but you do need him to make 1 or 2 of those saves at the end there. But I think if you can get just above average goaltending from Jeremy Swayman, I mean, think about where the Bruins are right now, and he has struggled. He has not been, he's middle of the pack in like most stats for goalies. His high danger save percentage has not been great. He's in near the bottom of the league in that at 5-on-5. If you can get him to just be average to above average, think about where they would be. Think about where this team would be with that. And he has been better of late. I know everybody loves to hate on Jeremy Swayman, especially after the contracting, but he has been better of late. So I do think he's someone, obviously, that you really need near his best. I'm not going to say at his best because that doesn't always happen. But if you can get him to go on a run, sort of like what Linus Ullmark's been doing in Ottawa, or even close to that, this team is more comfortably in the playoffs. And you definitely need Swayman's best when the playoffs come around. You need 2024 playoffs, Jeremy Swayman, 100%. So to me, he's the guy you need the biggest. You need to come up the biggest going forward. My hot take for this, for the next 3 months or for the rest of the season, and we'll see how this plays out. But my take, Patra comes up and plays between Zacha and Pastrnak. I like it. I like it a lot. I like the idea of it. It sounds nice. I can picture it in my head. It looks nice. That skill that Matt Patra brings, the good two-way ability, the high hockey IQ, putting him between Zacha and Pastrnak, I think that gets a lot going. And you think about it, like that line right now with Morgan Geekie, as I said earlier, has been working. And Pasternak's mainly been the playmaker, which you would normally think wouldn't be the case, but he's been the guy setting up Pavel Zacha or setting up Morgan Geekie. I think if you put Matt Patra up there, who is, has a ton of confidence coming out of Providence whenever they do decide to bring him up, he becomes a playmaker. He becomes the guy that could be setting up Pavel Zacha or setting up David Pastrnak. What he could bring to the power play too, like revitalizing that. And maybe we're expecting too much, but I do just think his overall skill, his setup abilities, and just his offensive IQ and what he can do in the offensive zone and protecting pucks along walls and elongating plays and things like that, I think he brings a lot there that would work really well with Zacha and Pastrnak. And the best part is you keep that second line intact with Marchand, Lindholm, and Coyle, and then that third line, Geekie gets to go down to, and probably center. And your third line is Brazo, Geekie, and Wahlstrom, and or Frederick, not and or. You don't get 4 people on a third line or on any line. But if they dealt Frederick, you would still have that be your third line with Brazo, Geekie, and Wahlstrom. So that's my hot take. My hot take going forward is that Matt Patra works his way up. I would love to say like my hot take is they trade for Dylan Larkin. I just don't know if they have the assets. Maybe Matt Patra is the centerpiece of that deal. You look at sort of Detroit's rebuild and when are they going to hit their stride? Is Larkin going to be kind of too late for that, in his career for him to be there when they're making the playoffs? So I would love to say they go out and trade for Dylan Larkin, but I'll keep my hot take relatively hot. I'll keep it. I'm not going to say it's warm. I think like most people would think Patra would come up and send to the third line. So I'll say that's like, if it's a stove, that's like a 7 out of 10. Whereas like if I said, oh, they're going to trade for Dylan Larkin, that would be a 10 out of 10 on the Heat scale. So finally we get to the MVP so far, which is kind of tough because no one's been the MVP from start to finish. There's no guy that's been, consistent throughout. So you kind of have to go off of late, since the coaching change. And there are 2 that come to mind, but I give my MVP award to Brad Marchand. Brad Marchand has been your MVP so far this year. His goal scoring went way up after the coaching change. He's had some huge goals this year, scored versus Detroit right after the coaching change to win that game in Detroit. Had that great game against the Islanders right before Thanksgiving. Scored 2 right at the start of the game to get that going. 10 goals and 8 assists since the coaching change. Had an assist on Friday. Even at 36, we've talked about him a lot, kind of slowing down over the last couple of years. He had surgeries this offseason. He had the double hip surgery a couple of years ago. And we're like, all right, well, he's going to slow down. And it looked that way through the first 2 months of the year. I mean, he was having a tough time there and very on and off, very spotty production. And since Sacco took over, he has been dynamite. And to me, just his ability to score, the clutchness of those goals, to me, he's been your MVP so far. The other guy is David Pastrnak. Pastrnak has a legit shot at it. He was definitely the team MVP last year. There was no doubt about that. And I think he's been good. There's still more to be desired from him. And I think it's kind of impressive that we feel that way, even though he is going at a point per game pace and he's been much better over the last month. So, still need to see some stuff from him. But for me, the MVP is Brad Marchand so far this year. So I think that covers it. I think that covers superlatives. I don't think we missed any big ones. Some other guys that maybe should get some props. Justin Brazeau was scoring at the beginning of the year when they were struggling. He was someone that was reliable. He hasn't been producing as much of late, but for that stretch there when everybody wasn't, he was. So I give him props. Need more from McAvoy for sure, but again, has looked better over the last month, has looked better since the Sacco coaching change. The D have been much more active in the offense. So that's sort of the superlatives. That's Superlatives. I hope you enjoyed this. It's always fun to just get to chat, you and me. And that's Bruins Beat. That is Bruins Beat. So we'll be back next week. I'm Evan Marinofsky, you Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.